indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't put on these lectures to frighten anyone. I don't put on these lectures to stir up hate. President Clinton does a good job of that. I really feel like that's the ADL's function in life. I want to make a mention about Pat Buchanan. I'm not backing Pat Buchanan. I feel like Pat Buchanan is coming the closest to saying what the American people want of the politicians that are allowed to speak and run in the Republican Party. He's telling you about the New World Order. That's not my term. That's their term. It's on the back of your dollar bill. So you know it's been around a little longer than I have, or than Bob has, or the militia has. They've had the New World Order planned for some time. Henry Kissinger did a great article on a pro-New World Order in Time magazine last year. George Bush has used it many more times than I have, in a positive sense, since I've never used it in a positive sense. I feel that you must be educated, the American people must be educated to learn exactly what's going on in the world today. We have a choice, and our politicians are pushing this one world, unified, United Nations protected world. And it's in direct violation to the Constitution of the United States. Now, if they come out and say it, and give you a choice and say, okay, everybody that wants to live under an unelected, socialistic, fascist state as outlined in the UN Charter, raise your hand and step over here on this side of the line. And everybody that wants to continue what our forefathers started 200 years ago, a constitutional republic in which you are the government, step on this side of the line. Which way do you think this room would tilt? If they would come out and tell the truth about the situation that we're in today, if they would tell you, look, kid, when you're born, we're going to give you a social security number, sign on the dotted line, kid. Or even maybe if they just waited till we were 18 and said, okay, here's your choice. You can sign up in the federal government right over here and have Social Security and have Medicaid, Medicare, and aid for the underprivileged and aid for the people that can't read, and we'll take care of you. You just do what you're told, pay your taxes, and we'll take care of you from birth to death. Like Hillary Clinton says, it takes a village to raise a child. Not my kids. I'll raise my children, and I want you to raise yours and teach them American values. If they would say that, if they would tell you, you don't really have to pay this tax, but if you do, we'll give you credit. We'll give you, you can pay us $300,000 for this $20,000 home over the period, with inflation and all that. Or you can be a free sovereign citizen as outlined in the Constitution, not a 14th Amendment citizen, but a free citizen, responsible for yourself, responsible for your family. Don't pay the taxes, don't get the benefits. A lot of us would choose to be protected, to be insured, to be cared for by Big Brother, because that's the way we've been brought up in that system. But the difference between a democracy and a constitutional republic is that in a democracy, 51% of the people can vote you into slavery, and in a republic, 80% of the people can't, as long as we maintain our constitutional republic. And that's really what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. Now I'm going to get off the podium and bring up the man you really came here to hear, Bob Fletcher.
I'm going to try and use this remote mic if it's working. So it sounds like it is pretty well. Can you hear pretty good?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, good deal. Well, first off, it's a pleasure to be here. I've not been in Albuquerque for a long time. I was here a long time ago when I was a youngster. And it's fun to be back as an adult, so to speak, or whatever I am at this point. What I'm going to do now, I have actually more material than we could even cover in the period of time you're going to be here this evening. And what I'll probably do is I want to talk for about 1 hour. We're going to take a brief break, and then I'll get back up, and then we'll go on from there so that you don't get chair rot, so to speak, sitting. And let me get a piece of major equipment here that I need. Not very impressive. It's too bad. I see we have some of the media, and they're not going to be able to stay long enough, which is always the case, and it's really a shame, because what happens is they miss the bulk of the reality of actual documentation relative to our concerns. So what I want to do is start off, first off, those folks that don't know anything about myself, I'm going to kind of give you a real brief synopsis, I have extensive amount of material relative to how I got into this, but I'm going to kind of skip over that, I think, and sort of get into the rest of it. How I got into being so concerned about what was happening is really a tremendous story unto itself, and it's rather bizarre. Back in 1985, I owned a toy manufacturing company in Atlanta, Georgia. We manufactured puppets, the most non-aggressive thing you could imagine, I guess, little toy puppets for children. And at that time, I was doing very well, extremely well. I was, probably within the next year, I would have become a millionaire. And it was a typical American dream. I started out in my basement making these goofy little things, and they sold so well that it just went like a snowball. And I had an opportunity to merge with a company in Atlanta, Georgia, that was a cheap watch distribution importing company. That's what they externally appeared to be. All right? That company turned out, in fact, to be a Central Intelligence front operation for Oliver North at that time. Additionally, a front operation for a variety of events. For example, they were shipping missiles into Angola, where they were fooling around with taking over that government, forcing that one out, controlling the government that was there. They were also shipping weapons to 4 or 5 other foreign countries. What happened basically was I went through the regular merger that you do. I was never paid properly on it because it was to be progressive over a period of 3 years, actually. And after being in there a short period of time, I realized that things weren't like they were supposed to be. This was not just a novelty junk watch distributor importer. I had major generals coming in and out of my offices at the toy factory. General Singlov and General Adderholt. General Adderholt was the head of Air America in Vietnam. Those of you who have any information relative to that, that was also Opium Air. They used to bring the narcotics out of Vietnam on the Air America flights. General Adderholt literally headed it up. General Richard Secord worked for General Adderholt during that campaign and has continued his relationship. General Adderholt maintains a thing called, let's see, I believe it's, I can't think of the name of it right now, but out of Fort Walton, Air Commandos, which he has continued since the war to supply covert aircraft for a variety of covert operations for the intelligence community, etc. So these characters were in and out of my toy factory, obviously, and again, I'm condensing all of this. Eventually, they got around to myself, since prior to the toy manufacturing business, I had an international consulting company where I had dealt with West Africa and a few countries. So what they did was approach me, and finally, after the reality was, I confronted the fellow named Gary Best, who was this intelligence operative, and I said, what is going on here? What are we using my toy company for? And without batting an eye, he said, we sell armament. You know, and since we were not Lockheed and we were not Martin Marietta, I was trying to figure out how that was in. I asked him how that could possibly be, and as a matter of fact, he said, well, don't worry about it, it's all legal. So that was a little perplexing at that point, because at that time I didn't realize that, in fact, they were working directly for Ronald Reagan and George Bush out of the White House. So for all intents and purposes, it could appear to be legal. Now the downside, of course, is the narcotics coming in and the weapons going out, okay? And of course the reality, all of that business that was going on with the weapons and all was not legal at all. They finally got around to myself and attempted to recruit me as a courier into Angola. And basically the way that went down was they guaranteed that I would make more money than the President of the United States for the rest of my life if I would get directly involved. They said the downside was if I spoke to the wrong person, I would be killed immediately. So it's a little bit to the negative on the downside. So since I was never oriented in the James Bond direction at all, or at least I didn't think I was, I passed on and I said, no, the hell with you guys. I said, you need to pay me up. They owed me $250,000. I said, you need to pay me up or give me my toy factory back. I'm out of here, and I don't care what you guys are doing. I'm not even interested in it. Well, they said, well, you're not going to get paid anymore, and you're out of here, and if you talk to anybody about this, you'll be killed. And that sort of brushed me in the wrong direction also. That was kind of a little bit like a mongoose. You don't want to do that to me. So I just said, okay, and I was out of there, and I initiated some legal action. And what happened, in fact, and I'll give you a little bit of this, what took place, as a matter of fact, this is the little toy puppets that I manufactured. They look like real animals. The name of the company was the Animal Factory. A short time after finding out what these characters were doing, the fellow came in, his name's Gary Best. He came into my office there one day after they had made me privy to what was happening, and he said, we're going to start handling these, and he threw a colored brochure on my desk, and I thought that it was going to be some new toys, because we picked up a whole line of real neat, inexpensive, wonderful little dolls and things of that sort. And I thought he had a new toy, and this was what he decided we were going to start handling. Now, the Hellfire missile, which is available only to the Army for the most part, and it's utilized, it's an anti-tank, anti-aircraft, real neat combination thing, and it costs $65,000 approximately each. It costs you $65,000 with your tax bucks. The Hellfire, since we were, at that time, the bulk of the, for example, the toys and the novelty watches and things of that, which it was a legitimate company running over here, or, that part of it, and that's the way they do it. They utilize it as as a good front. So if a guy, for example, when they wanted me to go to Africa, into Angola, the idea was I would go over there, buy some toys, talk to a few toy people, and then deliver information to the rebels there that they were supporting, that the intelligence community was supporting. And then, of course, I would fly back, and if anybody asked me what I was doing, well, then I'm just a toy manufacturer, and I was over there getting some new toys or setting up some new marketing. Now, the watches and all those things were profusely marketed throughout the 7-Eleven stores and the small, the local, like the Circle K and all that type of convenience stores. Those cheap $9.95 and $19.95 watches, you see, that, by the way, cost us 50 cents. Okay, give you an idea, so there's a good markup there, too. But part of my job was marketing and setting up promotional concepts on how to move those watches and how to do all that, as well as my own little puppet toys, okay? Now, as soon as he introduced these to me, I was trying to figure out that we probably would have to set up a typical, some kind of a payment plan for the average guy at the 7-Eleven store for the Hellfire missiles. And we could potentially, of course, set up maybe, you come in, you pick up a 6-pack of beer to go and 2 Hellfires, and maybe hit your credit card or something like that and work out the $65,000. But other than that, I couldn't imagine, when he threw this on my desk, I couldn't imagine where I was going to go on the marketing concept of the Hellfire missiles. There were several things. I'm skipping over all this miscellaneous information because I want to get on into the meat of it. This is mostly information that relative to the toy business and what happened, and we have too much other material to cover. So what happened when I finally realized, to my total amazement, that first off, they do this all the time, the intelligence community, and typically they'll suck people into it. You know, the idea was that I would say, well, yeah, you know, $150,000 a year guaranteed plus expenses and complete coverage on everything would be really kind of neat. So typically what happens, they will do that. They'll draw people in. Then they, once you're involved with running some illegal arms or something else, maybe bringing back a small package of narcotics or something at some time, now they have you, see? Now they've got you by the tail. All right, so now you can't go anyplace. You can't blow the whistle because you're out of here, so you put you in prison. And when they're done with you, if they don't blow up your airplane or shoot you or have you have an auto accident or something, they can always put you into the local Cusco with something that they have on you. All right, so that's a regular ongoing procedure. And it blew me away, the same as it would have upset any of you, to realize that this was an ongoing event. Ronald Reagan's name was mentioned directly to me in 1985, being involved totally with the Iran-Contra business, the drugs, well, of course, with the guns at that time. And then I realized that after I started pursuing these bad guys, they did a neat thing with me, for example. I started chasing, with my lawyer friend, we started getting information and doing freedom of information to find out who were these jerks, all these characters that were in and out, who they were, because I didn't know very much about any of this stuff. The same as you wouldn't probably if you're not a student of it. And as we moved farther into it, and I got a little closer to finding out who was what, when, and where, they classified with an executive order all the information related to those little puppets as a national security threat. There's nothing worse than having these little furry puppets get out in the community at any given time, because it's pretty serious national stuff. And again, this is a typical situation that they do all the time. If somebody starts getting too close to something, it becomes a national security situation. They close it. If somebody, even at a local level, FBI, regular police, a sheriff or something, all of a sudden he discovers some outrageous thing, like in Atlanta several years back, they came across an entire warehouse in Atlanta filled with C4 explosive plastics. If it had ever gone off simultaneously, it would have looked like Hiroshima in the local industrial area of Atlanta. And as the police locally started doing an inquiry and got closer to it, the national security, Oliver North's people right out of the White House, came in right away with a telephone. They called the chief of police and said, turn all your records and everything over, stop your investigation. You're doing a good job. Now give it to us. Okay, now shut up and don't go any farther with it because it's national security stuff. So forget that you ever found it and started investigating it. Give us everything. Thank you very much. Now go to work doing parking tickets. And they take all the information, run it through the shredder. That's the end of that. National security, and you never found out about it. Nobody ever knew. And they send in trucks and pick up the junk and get it out of there. Well, what I realized that what I was finding with my lawyer as we started doing investigations was that my case, which was a small one, and no big deal at all, but was related to all kinds of other little things, and that it was all coming in one direction. And that is what we consider to be the New World Order. And that it's been going on for years. And I never would have believed it. If I had listened to myself doing a presentation, or somebody doing my presentation a few years ago, I would have said, this guy's a real nutcase. I would have said, this guy's crazy. There's no way that this stuff has actually been going on for 40 or 50 years and going in one single direction all this time to overthrow the country, people inside our government at the highest levels conspiring to overthrow the country. And I finally realized, however, that it has been going on for a long time. And this is old George, and he's seriously pissed, and he was even when they did this picture, at what's going on. And it's interesting because it goes back as far as Uncle George's time. You know, we forget about this thing. Remember, this is the Declaration of Independence, and of course, right at the bottom, which I've marked here, it's interesting because Bill Clinton missed this, obviously, when he made cracks about the militia Patriot people being non-patriotic, and he said, "How dare you call yourself a patriot for questioning the government?" That's literally what Bill Clinton said. And at the very bottom, at the original Declaration of Independence, and this is a little off-center, and I apologize, but what it says basically is that it is your duty, if we have a lousy government, to replace those suckers. And that was in the Declaration of Independence 200 years ago. And of course, Bill Clinton has probably not read that or never understood it anyhow, so he would come out with these outrageous statements. Another thing that's interesting we find out when we go back this far, this is, and again, I'm going to take a lot of time with this, but it's really important. This is 1787 during a debate a short time after the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And the basics of this debate was, and you can see what the top of it says, the dangers of paid bureaucrats, salaried bureaucrats. And back then, the debate on the floor of the Congress in 1780 was that if we start paying these suckers when they go into Washington, they're going to expand their greed and power to a point to where they will be stealing out of everybody's pocket. And the argument on the floor at that time was that we need to have totally and completely voluntary people going into Washington, the Congress and the Senate. And if we did that, none of them are going to be arranging bills to where they get a few million into their back pocket or a few million into their friend's back pocket or whatever the deal might be. And that was how far back some of our forefathers realized it. And then we had the concept of one world government, which is our concern. One world government is a non-representative, socialistically oriented government, period. And these people tell you, well, don't worry about it, you know, etc. That the way they're selling it, as a matter of fact, to all the dummies out there, is that wouldn't it be wonderful to never have war, a war concerned with Russia again, for example, or Red China, never have to worry at all about having a conflict with other foreign nations. And certainly that would be wonderful. And I would certainly agree with that. You would all agree. And I would agree to one world government. Absolutely in a heartbeat. If I thought the suckers that were going to be running that would have the attitude, and I'm going to use this not to get into religion at all, but to use it as an attitudinal concept. If I thought they all had the general attitude of Jesus Christ, I would back it 100%. If I knew they were going to be honest, righteous people in any direction at all, if I thought they were going to be good guys, hey, bring him on, go ahead and set it up. I think it would be terrific. All right? But that ain't what's going to happen, guys. And the people that are aiming us in this direction, that have been doing it for so many years, have in fact already taken control of all of the banks. They basically own and run and control everything as it is at this point. I'm not going to get into things like the Federal Reserve that most of you probably know doesn't have anything to do with the United States government. It's a private corporation. Is a corporation for profit? The major Class A stockholders receive dividends at the end of the year on the profits made with the Federal Reserve. And for the people that don't understand or can't imagine, or that's a surprise to you, do a simple test yourself. Look it up in the book, the phone book, where they list federal agencies. You're not going to find the Federal Reserve in the telephone book. End of story, folks. So you don't have to do any major research on that one. It is not a government agency. It's a private corporate entity. And these bums that have flim-flammed us and BS'd us for so long have taken complete control of all the money. Now these same characters, and it's international. Matter of fact, the Class A stockholders, a handful of them are Americans, and a handful of them are totally European foreigners. They have nothing to do with the United States of America other than draining the money out. And I'm not going to get into the financial side of things. That's a whole separate program. One world government. People ask me, how far does the real intent go? This was a group This is dated. I'm going to move it up to the date. You don't necessarily have to try to read all these things, but up to the date, that's 1942. And they make reference to creating and starting out the one world government many years ahead of that, in the 30s. The United Nations was created solely and completely as the vehicle for one world socialism, period. That's it. And when people, of course, they love to point at myself and you guys too, you know, that you're a conspiracy freak, right? And somebody said to me a while back, he said, Mr. Fletcher, you see a conspiracy behind every Bush. And I said, well, I think that's accurate. We're talking Prescott Bush, Jeb Bush, George Bush. You know, you're fairly accurate on that. I guess I had to admit to that. You know, he was right. And they damn well are. But the point is, if you can, in fact, come up with the documentation of what was planned, preset, and what was going to happen, what was going to take place 40, 50 years ago, even if you forget the fact that things like the Illuminati, which is the original crazy concept that goes back 200 years, the Illuminati concept. And that's the same thing. It's to slowly take back the country. The damn Illuminati, which is a secret group, if you will, or association of several secret groups, it does go back 200 years. I never would have believed that. I could trace 50 years with physical documentation. All right, and but the bottom line is the Illuminati had this concept within a year or two of the creation of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. They had already, guys from Europe had already come over, had gotten deeply involved here in the United States at that point in time with the idea that said, hey, wait a minute, these jerks put together a terrific piece of paper called the Constitution, and we're not going to be able to control America if we let these people get away with this. And it was already a done deal on the left hand, where we did have this Constitution going that protected your rights individually as a human being to not be enslaved. And they began that long ago, what do we do to take this sucker back? And I'll guarantee you one thing, that at Queen, inside the castles in England right now, in London, England, that the kids, Prince Philip and all the rest of them, as they're being brought up, I will damn well wager that they're taught from day one that the bums over there in the United States stole your property that your great-granddaddy owned. You can damn well be sure that that's the mentality that's put in their heads growing up over there. And when you can figure out how to get that back, you'll be doing a service to the family, the royal family. Because those people over there are squatters, and they stole it from your great-great-granddaddy. And I'll guarantee you that's the direction it goes back that far. But I discovered a neat thing. This was done 45 years ago. This is a little pamphlet called the United Nations Exposed. This was printed approximately in 1955. I'll just show you, you can get an idea of the print. This is the fellow that put it together. And he was involved. Matter of fact, it only cost $2, so you know it was a long time ago. This guy was actually involved with the Senate, the Congress. He had a couple of friends in the Senate and Congress in 1955. The contents shows you an amazing expose. And the reason I bring this up is the material that is in this book, it's totally out of print and very difficult to locate and all that garbage, of course, at this point. He has everything in here. He talks about the UN slowly disarming, right here. The UN disarming American citizens. 1950. It goes on down. It talks about the United Nations destroying the Constitution. It talks about the unification of the churches to move us into a single one world church, which, by the way, those of you that are not aware of, that's profusely underway, including people like Billy Graham, involved with it, unfortunately. And again, they're being sold. The concept is, you know, well, gee, we need to just love and bring in everybody, you know. And if this guy over here, he likes to pray to little green frogs, you see. But that's okay, because frogs are the same as Jesus Christ, all right? And so we need to bring, because it's a, you know, et cetera, et cetera. They're trying to push this world worship of the earth That's part of it too. The Gorbachev Foundation, they're pushing that. But all of this, which is amazing, because this is 40 years, 45 years ago, listed all these little elements. Now let me show you a few things that are in that 40-year-old book. Most all of you obviously are aware of the GATT trade agreement. The GATT trade agreement, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, was just signed. At this point, it's about 1 year ago that it was signed, okay? So it's just brand new, put into the system. 26,000 pages, this single document. It would approximately go from here to the ceiling if you stacked it. I will give $1,000 to any senator or congressman that read it. I'll give you $100 if you can find me any senator or congressman that can actually read good. Well, that's it. Anyhow, the GATT trade agreement, the real downside of that for Americans is, for example, that no longer can any international trade dispute or disagreement be brought before any court in the United States of America again. Period. It's all over. So if you have a company like Weyerhaeuser Wood or somebody like that that does international trade on a regular basis, if they have a dispute relative to shipping goods someplace overseas, it's too damn bad. You've got to go, and even if it affected, let's say, $2 billion in business, even right here in New Mexico, all right? They have a dispute. They have to go to Geneva, Switzerland with their complaint. They have to go before the World Trade Organization, which is part of the one world government. They go there before 122 other nations with an equal vote to the United States of America. That includes some countries that aren't much bigger than this auditorium. They have an equal say-so and equal vote. It's 7, 8, 10, 25, or 45 votes over there in Asia, let's say, use that for an example, that does not want Weyerhaeuser to ship their goods. End of story. You're out of business. And they don't give a damn if it means 25, 35,000 people losing their jobs in the United States. That's tough. And it cannot even go before the court in the United States of America. That's one of the most grievous points. Another strange part of the GATT trade agreement is the obligation to register all infants in the United States with their national identification number. It's not referred to as a Social Security number. It is referred to as an identification number separate, which the ID will get into later on. Well, the GATT trade agreement. So they put that sucker together a year ago and signed it. 200 treaties inside the GATT trade agreement. 200 treaties, each one of which is supposedly to be voted and adjudicated and read and gone over individually. If a treaty is going to affect our laws here, which they do, it must be gone over individually and reviewed and then voted on, and it must be passed by a majority of the Senate and the Congress. There's 200 of them inside the 26,000 pages. And this was a plan 40 years ago. This was published in 1955, the GATT trade agreement. So when people get talking about how strange it is to talk about conspiracies and how silly it is to worry about the United Nations, they need to probably get a copy of this. How many of you heard a little while back that they were planning to bring in red Chinese Hong Kong police officers as an enforcing group someplace in some certain parts of the country? So some of you heard about that, right? Okay. Well, we raised a lot of hell about that out of the militia. And we raised enough cane that they altered the wording in the paperwork. They did still pass it. They changed it to the requirement for all police stations, or if they wanted it, to have ethnic police enforcement. All right, that meant, for example, in Los Angeles, if you have a big community of Vietnamese there, then they could set up an entire Vietnamese police force. And of course, if necessary, you need to do this good, so we'll bring them directly from Vietnam. Okay? And I'm serious, this is a done deal. Now, what's interesting is, right here, again, this is 40 years ago, folks, the plan to bring in the red Chinese as a United Nations policing force, or other tribal enforcers. And there it is in black and white, 40 years ago. So again, making the point particularly relative to, here also it talks about putting together, down here, the United Nations police force, okay, and to globally remove the weapons from everybody. Their concept in the one world government is that the only people that will have guns at all will be the enforcing police agencies of the United Nations. Again, this is 40 years ago when it was planned, and it was found out by the congressman and one congressman named Bricker that discovered this whole thing 40 years ago. All right? Well, son of a gun. That's last year, or a year back, actually, that's 1994. And the United Nations doing what they planned to do 40 years ago, and that is to move forward with global gun control. All right, well, that's not bad enough. How many of you enjoy sending your tax, send your money in every year? Oh, you get too many people on that one. How many of you know that on the front of the 1040 information direction booklet, it says, thank you for participating in the world's largest voluntary tax program? Did you know that that's physically on the front of the 1040 form, on the information booklet? Look and see this year. Of course, they may have removed it by now because we made a big deal out of that, but a couple of years ago it was certainly on there. They had a plan 40 years ago to create their own individual tax for the United Nations. This is separate money from the support that they suck out of our pockets anyhow with our voluntary obligation to support the United Nations. All right? This again now, 1955. All right? This is a few months ago. There it is. And they pretty well what they're going to end up doing is going to have a taxation on all the crude oil, for one thing, shipped any place on Earth. All right, they'll get a little piece of the action, and it'll be a tax. There will be other means by which they'll do it also. You can't imagine in your wildest dreams what kind of money you can generate by taxing crude oil. All of it. In other words, it's not a matter of a single nation being taxed. We're talking about all of the energy sources of the world. But this is how far all of this goes back. And in 1955, this guy pointed out that the United Nations' full intention of totally replacing, of course, our constitutional republic in the United States. And that's how far it goes back. This was done in 67. This is a book written by Gary Allen. He's a terrific guy. He wrote this book back in the 60s. And he had discovered the direction things were going back then. And he made a list from the actual mandates laid out by the One Worlders themselves back at that time. This is now 30 years ago, talking about the things that they were going to accomplish and what would be necessary. And of course, we're talking about world court, world tax system. Down here, about abolition of private firearms, etc. Gary Allen is now deceased. He was absolutely right on, and he was ahead of his time by several years. Now, there's another one here during the same period of time in 67. All right, if you'll notice up here, there's a guy named Harlan Cleveland. He was a one-worlder, still around during the Kennedy administration, etc. He was a one-worlder, New World Order guy. He went before the Senate back in, I think it was 76, right? In 1976, he did an entire presentation and said, we must move into one world government. And the list that he has there is that 8 or 10. Can you see that at all? Okay. The list that he has there, in fact, was what he said was necessary to have complete one world government. This was presented before the Senate. Now, number 6, I want you to make note of that for a little bit later on. Number 6 is the necessity of total control of the weather at human command. If you'll notice, I'll get into that a little bit later on. The Senate had a little humor with it, but that's turned around now. When I presented that on the floor of the Senate a while back, that in fact they were controlling the weather. They thought it was funny, and now they want a complete report on it. Nonetheless, if you also look at things like number 4, where they talked about controlling the wealth of the oceans and seabeds, George Bush, just before he left office, put together a bill that in fact causes major fisheries to get involved in an allocation structure, similar to the way they divvy out oil well drillings, okay? So in other words, that's the beginning of that particular part. And of course all the rest are like the world currency, they're working on that, and things like rewrite the rules of trade and investment, that's the GATT and the NAFTA. The NAFTA program is kind of neat because now we have the ability to just let the 18-wheelers that have selectively been chosen to come right on through from Mexico with all the dope on it. They don't even bring the dogs in now, see, because of the NAFTA agreement. They got a little list of, oh, this one's okay, it's a Zapata oil truck owned by George Bush's people, right? Okay, you let that one through, that's cool. You know, and the dope dogs are having nervous breakdowns over here. They're hemorrhaging for crying out. These dogs are bleeding out of their nose for crying out loud, smelling so much cocaine they're about to have a cardiac arrest. But they say, okay, yeah, that's a good one. That's Uncle George's. Bring that one through. You know, and that's what they're doing with the NAFTA. Besides the fact, of course, losing industry. This is another great one. This is a page that I secured literally out of a national security summary for the year of '61. And the book is about this thick, and it generally is just that, is the national security summary of all the major events of the security level out of the United States government. And basically, this is a 30-year plan to disarm America that they agreed to do. This was a done deal. And of course, the spooky part, where we are right now, is basically at the bottom there. And if you'll notice, it says, at that point, no, well, let's take number 2, where they're going to establish the United Nations Peace Force. It says further reduce armed forces and weapons stockpiles. And that sounds good, again, you know, unless only people that are going to have guns are going to be the enforcers. And then we get down to the third one where we are right now, a fully functioning United Nations Peace Force and the prohibition of manufacturing, shipping, or owning of armament of any sort except for the enforcing United Nations Police Force. Now, most of you also probably know that Mikhail Gorbachev has the Gorbachev Foundation at the Presidio in San Francisco full-time. All right? A guy named Scranton, Williams, I think it was William, if I'm not mistaken, Scranton, the congressman, senator, who was there for so many years, he rusted fast to the seat, for crying out loud. All right? He was a guy that put together the special paperwork to permit Gorbachev to be in the Presidio in San Francisco with his foundation. It's his One World Global Foundation. The Gorbachev Foundation, by the way, the second in command vice president is Cranston of the World Government, One World Government Gorbachev Foundation. All right? Gorbachev, a few years back, made a statement that he's never changed, I'm sure. 1988. It's to move forward to the New World Order. This is directly out of one of his own speeches. There's another guy, of course, as was mentioned earlier, another fellow that's yacked in 1991 all about New World Order, and that was, of course, George Bush. The war in Iran, or excuse me, the war in Iraq was totally synthetic. You know, they did a lot of numbers there. But the main backbone of that was, it was the first creation of a one world army. That was it. And he told you it was a one world army. He said, this is the new world order. This is George Bush. Standing next to him, or within a day or so at the United Nations, was Gorbachev. That said that he's willing and happy to accept the new world order, the one world government. If you stop and think about it, in the war with Iraq, the Hussein thing, first off, you have to understand one thing. Originally, of course, they told us the intent was to remove Hussein. Well, where is he? Sorry about that, guys. He's doing fine, right? Then you have to go back and say, wait a minute. What constitutes a war? That's two sides shooting at each other. All right? Hussein never shot back at us, ever. He threw a few Scud missiles up in the air, most of which I don't even think were targeted. They fell in the desert. One or two hit a few places. The one that fell, in fact, on a barracks and did kill a few American soldiers was because it was hit by a Patriot and fell on the building. Didn't have a damn thing to do with targeting. He had some 8,000 Chinese silkworm missiles that he could have launched and damn near taken out the bulk of our fleet. The silkworm missile is a land-covering missile that can be programmed to go over mountains and around obstacles. The silkworm can go just like this and go right in, and we can't stop the damn things. We attempt to stop them. As a matter of fact, some of you may remember, by accident, Iraq hit one of our boats, said that they thought it was an Iranian ship several years back, a few years back, and they apologized for it, and I think actually killed a person or two, and they said it was an error and a mistake. And our guys saw it coming, and with all the best radar and everything else, there's no way to stop these darn things other than shooting it with what is an electronic Gatling gun. All right? And they just shoot like crazy at this damn thing and hope they hit it. And that's all you can do. All right? Well, Saddam had several thousand of those. He used none of them. Zero. All right? So we really didn't have a war over there, but we did have the ability to do a lot of things. One thing was create the one world army. The second most outrageous thing was that they injected 450,000 of our own soldiers with bad infected junk that made them sick. And I just recently, and this will surprise you maybe a little bit, from the source, and that is Senator Rockefeller, as of a few months back, completed his staff, and I was involved with it a little bit. I don't have it with me, but it's available, as a matter of fact. I do have it. You can get back to me on it. He completed an entire report on the United States government infecting and using our own soldiers as guinea pigs for over 50 years. And the worst of it was, the recent thing with the Desert Storm business, was the literal infection, the shooting, injecting of 400 more thousand of our own soldiers with biological and chemical garbage. They didn't get infected over there. Now, it's possible that some of them did, but this huge quantity of guys that are now dying with these infected, 3 different diseases they have, the bulk of those people got it before they left with this infected trash. And I have that entire report. And again, it's a little bit of a surprise because it came out of Senator Rockefeller's offices. So the truth is, as far as that was concerned, the war over there, it was actually pretty synthetic. Now, I have a son who's a Marine. I did an expose once I got a hold of that business on the infecting our Marines with these shots ahead of time. I started, maybe 6 months ago, I guess it was, profusely involved on the radio and what have you, and disseminating the information because it's so disgusting, so outrageous that they would do this crap. And it's a matter of, hey, you shoot 100,000, we keep track of them and see how that crap's going to work in case we want to use it someplace else. And they didn't give a damn who got it. They were giving it to our soldiers. And it's connected to the MK Ultra thing that goes back 30 years ago when they used to do the mine stuff, the electronics, the chemicals, the LSD, and all that to private citizens. All right? A few months back when I started exposing this, of course, and because the report's there, this is not a super deal that I happen to come across. The report's available, okay? But again, typically because of the media, you're not going to hear a damn thing about this. Now, this thing comes right out of the Senate, totally documented. It's this thick. But you're not going to hear about it. So I start doing my thing. I have a son who's a Marine. And as of, June, July, August, my son was 3rd in physical fitness in his own platoon, his own battalion, okay? He's also a weightlifter up to that point in time, extremely physically fit, third in his whole group in general physical fitness. As of November, I received a call from him that he was seriously ill. He's in California. I received a call that he was seriously ill. They were treating him for an unknown biological disease. I contacted the doctor himself, asked him what he thought it was, and he says it's a histoplasmosis, which is one of the 3 diseases these guys got, theoretically, that went over to Desert Storm. My son never went to Desert Storm, but he is my son. He's Bob Fletcher's son. A week later, my son called and said, well, they've scheduled me. They're going to have to do some kind of surgery, apparently, on my lung. So he said it'll be another 30 days or so. I got a call 1 week later. He was about to die. They rushed him in an emergency, and they operated on my son and removed his entire lung. This is my son after they cut. How's that for an operation? They cut him almost in half and removed his lung. I got with the commander there that did the surgery, the commander of the base. And I said, what does my son have? And he says, we still don't know, Mr. Fletcher. He says it's still apparently this plasmosis blood. Actually, it's a fungal, an unknown fungal thing. I said, how many people have this? And he says, not very many. It's like 1 in 20 or 40 million people might get it, except for there's a lot of it showing up in the guys that went overseas. This was done to my son a few months ago. Fortunately, he's recovering, and he's a hell of a kid, so he's going to be all right, provided, of course, that it doesn't regenerate. Now, what are these characters doing? By the way, the MK Ultra, which I don't have any material with me this evening on, the MK Ultra was something that I had heard about a long time ago, and I take everything as strictly a rumor if I can't physically get documentation on it. The MK Ultra project was a Central Intelligence, predominantly CIA and Department of Defense operation, started many years ago, and it was where they used human beings in the United States as guinea pigs. And they did everything. They did electronic signal stuff. They implanted transponders and control mechanisms in their brains. They did LSD. They gave people stuff. They didn't even tell them. Not only did they use our military, of course, which was real easy, you know, because these poor kids, they're there, you know, and they say, we've got an inoculation. You all show up tomorrow morning, you get the damn thing. They didn't know what the heck they were getting, and that's the way they did it. Our country, our people that we trusted, doing this stuff for over 50 years to our own people. And of course, you guys know that lived here, or any of you that are older that lived here, you know, they're doing the same thing with releasing atomic junk in your backyard, right? And so what, 30, 40, 70, a few hundred people died of brain cancer and skin cancer and stuff like that. That's no good. They don't give a damn. It's beside the point. It's part of the program. Well, the MK Ultra, I finally, a year ago, approximately maybe only 9 months ago, I finally got a hold of all the paperwork on that was available. They destroyed 9,000 pages of stuff. I got about, I think, 650 pages, but it's enough. Because it's the admission, the physical admission of the head of the Central Intelligence Agency talking about what they did. How many people they killed. They took pregnant women that were at military camps, the wives of our military people, and shot them up with garbage and different things and made them smell stuff and did different stuff like that. And see if they lose a baby. You know, would the baby be born with 3 arms or what, you know. And then just make notes on it. This is good stuff, all right? The people that originally created the biological and chemical, that created the basis of it, were some of the guys that ran the Japanese after the war in 41, they ran Camp 531 in Japan, where they had thousands of captured people, our own and Russian and Americans and combinations of people, and they did biological tests and chemical stuff, tests on these people. I mean, they would just take a guy that they had captured and take whatever, rat urine, and just inject it into his body to see how it worked. You know, if he killed him real quick, they'd write it down. Hey, that stuff works. Then they did, over there, these guys did the most outrageous thing, disgusting, it's unbelievable. And that is, they injected them what they call these hot shots. They inject this unbelievable bacteria, the Ebola and all this kind of crap that you hear about, put it right into these people. They'd wait, maybe a few weeks or a few days, what it was, so the guy starts really dying of it. This guy's, really getting disgustingly ill. And they would commit a full autopsy of him while he was alive. They didn't give him anything that tended to pain and put him to sleep because that would screw up the experiment. You just hold this sucker down and cut him open. The guys out of that camp, Camp 531 in Japan in 1943 or 45, when we finally went in and occupied, our government took the heads of those guys when they found out what was happening, took the leaders, the guys at the top, and brought them over to the United States, cut them a deal and said, hey, we like this stuff. Start doing it here. And that was the beginning of our biological and chemical program in the United States. These slugs that did that kind of garbage to human beings. We brought them over, gave them houses, paid them big money, and protected them. Period. So, what direction are they going now across the country relative to the one world government? One thing they're doing, one part of it, is the militarization of our police forces, which is taking place all over the country. All right? This, for example, most of you may have seen this. These are the new badges for the United States Police. Now, I'm not sure, I don't know what the hell that is. I didn't realize the United States themselves had some kind of a United States Police. Those are the physical badges. Those of you that are aware of it, they've been doing major cooperative programs in a little while back. In Arkansas, they brought in 5,000 Russians to do cooperative programs with our military. Down in New Orleans, Louisiana area a little while back, they did a program where they actually brought in thousands of troops from all over the world and cooperatively functioned together. And the three-star general who was in charge of it, and we have it on videotape, the three-star general that was in charge of it, at the end of it said, it's good to see the military program here is finally coming together for the New World Order. That's his words, directly out of his mouth. This is great. We have a little place up in Washington, Everett, Washington. All right? That's the sheriff's truck. That's the sheriff's unit. They have taken over 1,000 of these armored personnel carrier units and shipped them out to regular police stations across the United States of America in the last year. I know of 1,000, there may be more, I'm not sure, but I know there are that many specifically. This is Everett, Washington. This is a little town, Snohomish County, up in outside of Seattle. Those people on the left are the police officers from Everett. That's not military. Those are the police officers. What's wrong with that picture, folks? What's wrong with this picture? When I was a kid, 4 or 5 years old, youngster, my mother and father, I'm sure your folks did the same thing to you guys. Now, as they said, listen, she said, Bobby, if you ever get lost, you're out someplace or whatever, you ever get lost or you get in trouble, you can get the friendly police officer on the corner, just go up and tell him who you are, and he'll help you, find your way back home or assist you in whatever little problem you might have, okay? And that was always kind of neat, because a policeman was this guy that wore a white hat, and he was honest and upright and forthright, and a wonderful guy that even us as little children could depend on, right? Okay, now, can you imagine in your wildest dreams sending your 4-year-old to this sucker? This is a police officer in the United States of America, all right? Now, you say, holy mackerel, if a kid got lost and went up to this sucker bastard, he'd never get out of the house again. The kid would never even want to go to school. And this is interesting because, notice this similarity here with this guy. Matter of fact, there's no difference at all, except the one over here on the right, who is the ATF agent, has a more expensive mask. This guy right here happens to be a Russian sharpshooter in Moscow, planning to go in and shoot some revolutionary people that they had in downtown Moscow a while back. So that's the kind of direction they're going with our police. The federal court did a ruling here a little while back. This permits the police, if someone is escaping from any prison camp at all, whatever type it may be, or prison installation, even if they're not armed, or even if they're in there for too many damn speeding tickets, okay? They do have the court permission now to shoot them in the back if they're escaping, whether they're armed or dangerous or not. Just shoot the sucker, okay? And that'll take care of that. In Boston, this is the Boston police, totally militarized. This particular event, they broke into a guy's apartment, as they do now on a regular basis. Matter of fact, more than you could ever imagine. You've got to be tied in with an ongoing Patriot group so you can find out how many times this garbage is going on. You're not going to hear about this on the news. All right? The numbers of times where they go in using the violent entry, immediate entry, and shoot to kill kind of a concept, it's bewildering. These guys, this particular day, went into a guy's apartment, crashed through the door, zoomed in there, slammed him to the floor, put the machine gun to his throat, and started going through his apartment, ransacking it and looking for whatever they were looking for. The man, who was an elderly gentleman, was scared to death. He had a cardiac arrest right on the spot, just had a heart attack and died. And then they realized they were in the wrong apartment. And the guy is still dead. This is terrific. This is one of these things, you know, this is almost humorous. Mr. Free, who's the new head of the FBI, a while back, he went over to Poland, and they had this anniversary or a memorial thing for the outrageous prison camp Nazi business that had gone on 50 years ago in Poland, and the deaths of the Polish people, etc., under Adolf Hitler. And Free, while he was over there, he made this speech, and he made a real big deal in his speech. He says, there's something we have to realize. If at any time, any place in the world, we find the governing government, the government themselves, to begin using local police force to carry out government-style policing. In other words, they bring in the local police agencies, as Adolf Hitler did, and start using them to carry out federal mandates in any nation on earth. We have to be totally vigilant and be aware that that is the beginning of a dictatorship. Now that's what FBI Director Free told the people in Poland, while over here, the San Francisco Police Department is training with the Russian forces. 50% of these people in this photo are San Francisco police officers. The ones that you see in the fatigues are Russian special operations soldiers training in San Francisco. Now, Mr. Free, what he needs to do is figure out what the hell's going on in his own country and not be worrying about everybody else. But it's amazing. Here he's talking about utilization of local police to do military enforcement, and that's what they're doing here. And slowly, they keep doing this garbage. See this character here? That's a Fresno police officer. That's the outfits that a group of them are wearing on an ongoing basis in Fresno, California today. What's wrong with that picture? This sucker's got a complete military gear machine gun. They stopped this poor kid over here for not wearing a seatbelt. I'm serious. You'll never want to take a Sundry ride again, for crying out loud. You get stopped a few times with these bimbos. This is what's going on in Idaho. Here they go. Again, this is all recent stuff. Post Falls, Idaho. This is a little tiny place, right? This is the police, again, same deal, militarized. They're shipping armored personnel vehicles, grenade launchers, and CS gas, like they used at Waco, into police stations all over the United States. These guys are practicing in a church. And of course, after the Waco event, you know, whatever, maybe they can make logic out of that, all right? And of course, fortunately, because we raised so much cane, the militias raised so much cane, we are getting some attention. Now, because you have to remember something, which I found out because I physically have done investigative research cooperatively in probably 5 or 6 major congressional and senatorial inquiries myself. I was hired by Manuel Noriega's lawyers to do investigative research in his case. And that's another separate story I'll get into maybe if we have time. But that's a bunch of baloney too. Manuel used to be George Bush's partner in several ongoing businesses, and it just went bad, so George Bush invaded Panama. But the point I want to make, though, is that these inquiries, these Senate and congressional inquiries, are nothing more ever than damage control for the Senate and the Congress and other people in government. That's it, period. There's never been one that had any serious inquiry at all. And periodically, if something's boiling real bad, like the Iran-Contra business that I was a witness in myself, physically a witness in the case, in that business, they selectively picked out a couple people, made like they had given them some kind of, you know, sent them to jail, you know, that did some kind of punishment on them. And then, of course, a few months later, the new president came in and said, no, I give them all pardons and they can all go home now. You know, they've had too much grief. They've been in there for 3 months. You know, and of course, where they send these characters is like some kind of a, you know, it's like the Holiday Inn, for crying out loud. And commonly, when they do pick out 1 or 2 guys, has to be a scapegoat for whatever the operation might have been, and they send them off for a brief period of time, they transfer a couple $1 million to the guy's account in Sweden, in Switzerland. Send them to the Swiss bank account. Give them a couple $1 million. You know, it's like, hey, you might have to do a 1.5 years at the local resort, okay, and we'll transfer a couple $1 million in the account. And I said, well, shit, I hate to do it, but I will. You know, okay, you twist my arm. You know, so that's how that goes down. As a matter of fact, when I was involved with the October surprise inquiry, which was the old thing in 1980 where Bush, Reagan, Bill Casey cut a deal with the Iranians for them to hold the embassy hostages until after the Jimmy Carter-Reagan election so that it would embarrass Carter, because he was trying to get them out. If he had gotten them out ahead of time in October of 1980, he would have been an American hero. He would have been president again. Reagan, Bush, and Casey, and a few other scumbags up there flew over, cut a deal with the Iranians, and said, look, you guys hold these hostages until after the election, then release them when we win, and we'll give you all the weapons you want ever to fight the Iraqis. This was when Iran and Iraq were in the middle of their 8-year war. Okay? Billions of dollars of weapons they promised them. That was the October surprise. It did happen. That was an event. That was a reality. I personally have an interview with the president of Iran at that time, who was Bonnie Sadr, and I had his own papers on it. He said, George Bush cut the deal with me, period. Okay? Now, I was involved. I sent, when they finally got around to having a congressional inquiry into it, again, because we kept boiling the water so much, they had to do something. Chief counsel to the Senate, or Congressional Foreign Affairs, his name was Spencer Oliver, got to be a good friend of mine up there. I was working with him. Finally, he put it together, and he said, Bob, send your information to us, send it up to me. I had 170 pages of documents that would have impeached and hung these guys for treason. I sent the material up, and he told me ahead of time, he says, they've set this up the same as the Iran-Contra hearings. They have Hamilton's involved, Congressman Hamilton and a few other people. He says, nothing's going to happen. I'm telling you right now, they already have it set. And what happened? Nothing happened. And out of the 160-some pages that I sent, that quite legitimately would have put these people in prison or hung for treason. When they finished the report, it came out, it's about this thick, big, outrageous thing, a whole bunch of garbage, right? Mostly baloney, non-important trash. Out of the stuff I sent them, they published about 5 pages of it. The rest of it, the pages are in there, but it says classified secret. You turn, it's a white page, right? It's classified secret. Document 55, classified secret. Document 56, classified secret. 57. Now you get pages, they got 100 pages of classified secret white pages. And that's the way to do it. It's what I referred to earlier with this crap that they get away with national security. They could come in here and kill everybody in here. Machine gun us to death. Block off the doors out there, clean up the mess, and when people started doing inquiry, they could say, listen, it was a national security situation. We can't let you know about it until the year 2027. See? And they do it. They get away with it. And that's not ridiculous, those of you that remember John F. Kennedy. Now, which one of the two are we closest to living under at this point in time, right? You know, the Communist Manifesto, we forget about this thing. You know, in Lenin and Marx, by the way, I make a point, these guys made a point several years ago, many years ago. They said it's imperative to move a nation into full communism. It's imperative that we move them first off into democracy. It's a stepping stone. The stepping stone into communist totalitarian government. How close is that over there, right there on that side, the Communist Manifesto, to what we have right now going on in the United States of America? It's a hell of a lot closer than the original Bill of Rights. There's several directions these characters are going with us here as they move us into this one world government. One of it is, as I say, the militarization of our police forces, the merger into one world armies. You know, we had this Sergeant New, a young military character that was ordered to put on the blue United Nations helmet and go to Bosnia. He handed the helmet back to them and asked them if they wanted a jar of gasoline. He said, I'm not going. I took an oath to support the United States of America and the Constitution of America, not to support some unknown foreign entity, a one world government. And I'm not going. You know, they threw him out of the Marines. They never challenged or brought forward his argument. They just threw him out on the basis that he didn't obey orders. And they can get away with that again. See, they throw that blanket over the top of everything and say, well, the guy just didn't obey orders, period. That's it. And here it is right here. You'll be court-martialed for that, so he's out of here. All right? God bless that kid. And if we had enough of them like that, we wouldn't have our soldiers leaving the country under this private enterprise. How come nobody ever asked the question of who the heck is the United Nations? We have no representation in the United Nations, period. Any of you guys vote for anybody that goes to the UN? No, absolutely not. Do we have any say-so? No. Non-representative, private entity. It's a private operation. And look at this. These were the heads of the Security Council for the United Nations. Pick out your American friend there. You know, what's wrong with this picture? Right? And of course, you know, they're trying to convince us on a regular basis that they're our buddies and all that good stuff. And yet, Gorbachev and these other guys, Khrushchev, you know, he said, we'll never turn away. We might appear to be your friend at some time, but we'll never turn away from our designation, of our destination of a one world communist government. Now, the guys up there in Washington have another war on us besides the one where they're physically coming into our own backyards and police stations, etc., and turning them into military operations. This is a bill, this was a terrorist bill that you guys heard about. And again, of course, they've generated synthetic terrorism in the United States of America. We don't have any damn terrorism here. That Oklahoma bomb was not a terrorist bomb. It's terroristic in nature, You know, you certainly could say that. I mean, certainly if some disgusting event like that takes place, that certainly is terrorizing. But it has nothing to do with terrorism, unless I'm an idiot. You know, the definition of terrorism or the concept of terrorism is when some kind of a group, maybe it's political or whatever it may be, or military, right, wants to move in a certain direction. They contact the press, the media, and the government, or whoever, and they say, we want to do A, B, or C, and if you don't do that, we're going to do something horrible over here. And that becomes terrorism. Then they do the event, they come back and they say, we did it, and we're going to do another one if you don't. Change this or do that, okay? And now you have terrorism. But when you have some characters that arbitrarily blow up a building, that's not terrorism. When you have some jerk that takes an SKS rifle in front of the White House, so far away that he couldn't even hit the damn White House, and pulls off a handful of rounds, and on the basis of that, they blocked off the White House, folks. It's artificial terrorism. It's a mind game. It's to make a reason for you to give up some of your rights. I do a tremendous amount of flying. You go into the airports now. Boy, you want to talk about a number, a psychological number on the people going to the airports. Holy mackerel. Continually, those of you that haven't been in airports lately, continually over the PA system is, do not park in the parking zone, your car will be taken away. Do not leave your luggage. Do not touch anyone else's luggage. Do not let anyone pack your luggage. Because of the new terrorist threats, the following things will have to be done. Da 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 da. Okay? And this goes over and over again over the loudspeakers. If you were watching this as a movie, as a Big Brother movie, an Orwell thing or something, you know, you'd laugh. You say, God, look at that. The PA system, right? It's like some stupid science fiction thing. And it's happening here, and it's intentional. Artificial terrorism to convince you, you've got to you go through I got news, you go through the sensing deal now, okay? They haven't cranked up so high, they were making me crazy the other day. Jesus, I kept going through beep, 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 and I'm thinking, you know, being who I am. And by the way, I carry a weapon on a regular basis, all right? And I do it legally, okay? I have a permit to carry and all that kind of too. But I always, you know, I worry like, you know, I'm going to forget the damn thing, see? Well, I'm a cooked goose if I went through the sound-off device, beep, 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 and they say, oh, Mr. Fletcher, oh, my God. You know, forget it. You never even see me again, see? I'd be gone for 600 years. You know, but I kept going through this thing. It was beep and beep, and I kept pulling stuff out of my pockets. You know, I did everything except strip naked, you know. And I went to beep, beep, beep. And then finally, over here, I had a gum wrapper, an aluminum gum wrapper. And that was setting off the damn device. That's how high they got this stuff. And it's a harassment thing. You know, you go through it, you know, beep, 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 you go back. Beep, 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 and you start taking off your pants and your shoes and your false teeth and everything else. You know, anyhow, it's all synthetic. And the idea is so that you're going to go along with things like the Terrorism Act. This is a great one, and you're going to love this sucker. This was to generate searches and seizures without warrants in the United States of America. Look at the bill number. You believe it. And what's really funny is this was put together by Bill McCullum from Florida, who was a jerk that I was a candidate against in 1990 in the United States congressional race. And I almost beat him. He spent $275,000 running against me or protecting himself against me. I only had $27,000. He spent 10 times as much money. I got about 41% of the votes. If I'd had any money, I'd been into Congress, you know, and I have no idea what I would have done up there. But although I told somebody, Senator Kerry asked me, because at one point in time it looked like, you know, whatever, it was like this. Senator Kerry, I had done some investigation things for him, and they said, what are you going to do if you win that race? You know, because I'm not a political type. I was just doing it because this guy's a slug. You know, and he really is. This guy's very bad news. Anyhow, he said, what are you going to do when you get to Washington if you win this race? And I said, well, I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm going to be one pain in the ass in Washington, D.C. And he said, Bob, he said, let me tell you something. And by the way, this is 1990. before I got into the militia. He said, Bob, let me tell you, you're already considered to be a pain in the ass in Washington. So I took that as kind of a compliment there. And by the way, if my miscellaneous language offends anybody in here, that's tough. Just so you understand where my head's at. I don't
do it on the internet, Bob.
Right. Oh, that's right, because they're going to try. No, we got a federal judge that put in a restraining order. See, that's another thing. Bill Clinton wanted to do this thing. You know, there is rotten stuff on the internet. That's, you know, on the computer thing. There is terrible junk coming in there. There is some pornographic trash that kids can pick up on. And that's bad news. You know, and of course, I wouldn't be surprised if the bad guys are putting some of that in so that, again, it's a terroristic thing. It's a control factor. They can come in and say, well, now we must regulate the internet because you have nasty stuff on it, okay? Although the kids can get considerably worse stuff just going to the grocery store and in front of the magazine stand, right? And, you know, going through the magazines. But they, Bill Clinton was going to attempt to do a bill that would, in fact, regulate everything on the internet. And a Supreme Court judge or a higher court judge just 3 days ago came out and said, I'm going to put a temporary restraining order. You can't do it. It's unconstitutional. You know, so God bless him. Here's another piece of garbage that they attempted to run through. This bill, all right? This is Janet Reno's own hit team, all right? This was for 2,500-man rapid deployment hit team so that when she wanted to do another Waco operation, she could have it completely legitimate and legal and send these guys in. And when I talked to some people in Washington, friends of mine, and they said the reality is this already exists. And all they're doing is trying to do the paperwork to legitimize what was already out there. They also pointed out to me that typically these people would be training others, and typically on a 10-to-1, which would generate approximately 25,000 rapid deployment trained, hooded, masked warriors to go in at any time they want to and do whatever they feel that they want to do. All right? This is a wonderful one here. This is a jerk out of New York, excuse me, a representative out of New York that put together this one, all right? This would prohibit the manufacturing, importation, exportation, sale, purchase, transfer, receipt, possession, or transportation of any handgun or handgun ammunition in the United States of America. Put together by Major Owens, a representative, if I'm not mistaken, out of New York, and nothing has been done with this yet in any serious direction. But see what happens with these also. These are psychological. They're psychological for the bums that are doing the bills up there. They put these in and then they run it through the system. It doesn't quite pass. They change a few parts of it. They run it through again a few times, all right? They change a few more things. Then they run it through again. And finally they say, oh, well, this is not so bad. You know, it's the old sales thing, right? I says, how much you want for this projector? The guy says, $27,000. All right, you say, that's too much. You say, well, hell, I'll take $15,000. Say, hey, that's a deal. Let me write you a check. Okay, it's the same thing. It's just slowly diminishing and adjusting people's heads. All right, this one, let's see, this sucker here. All right, this is the immigration. If I'm not mistaken, wait a minute, let me show you which one is it. Oh, no, excuse me. This is a neat one, all right? This is another unconstitutional piece of garbage. This is the one where they permit the use of military personnel, soldiers, on civilians at any time. They just want to call them up. Okay? This, again, this comes in after the Waco business and all the rest of that, and Randy Weaver, most people don't know, they sent 250 military officers or military personnel to Randy Weaver's cavalry to blow him away, his wife away. 250, fully dressed like they were going into Vietnam, with the camouflage on them, the netting, and everything else. It was not just what you heard about, the 2 or 3 people up there in an FBI sniper that claimed he accidentally shot Vicky and all that garbage. Bull crap. Because our people were up there, the Trockmans that created the militia in Montana. There's 4 of us up there, myself and 3 Trockmans for the last couple of years. All right? They're good friends of Randy Weaver. Their son was dating one of Randy Weaver's daughters. They were up there during the entire thing. We have videotape on the whole thing. 250 armed military personnel to blow his brains out. The intent, we ended up having so many people up there, they couldn't do it. The intent was to just burn the cabin down. They had all the equipment and everything. They had a helicopter came in. The intent, they were just going to firebomb it and burn the whole damn thing and just kill them all up there. That's a good exercise, a practice. It fits in with the militarization of our police. Anyhow, this stupid bill here would in fact permit the use of military at any time that they wanted to on American citizens. A little bit on the unconstitutional side. This is another one relative to the prohibition. Right here, you can read this part. Moynihan, you know that little character up there that used to be a go-between between some of the false information coming back from Vietnam. He was a mouthpiece for all the bull crap they fed us over there, from over there. All right, this one is relative to illegal to own any of those caliber bullets. Okay, so if you had a 9mm gun, you might as well throw it away. Okay, you could not own any of the bullets, or make any, or transfer any, or buy any. That's another bill that they tried to run through a little while back. This is the paper. All of this stuff is the paperwork war on us. This is a neat one. This is a joint resolution. You're gonna love this. You know the jerk I told you about, Major Owens, that came out with the idea of banning all handguns, lock, stock, and barrel? This is a neat one. He wants to change the Second Amendment to only apply the right to bear arms is for people in government, not you. I wonder if he'll get reelected. Holy mackerel. And then, this is a pretty heavy duty. You know, we yak about the United Nations being the center point for all this one world garbage, okay? And I was blown away because I received from some people, friends of mine in the United Nations, and by the way, this is something I have to point out to you. People always say, how good are we doing? How well are we doing? Well, of course, we're slowing these suckers down a little bit, all right, of their schedule. We are doing that. We're causing them some serious grief. That's working. In terms of people participating, we have admirals, police chiefs, sheriffs, CIA, FBI, senators, congressmen. We have people in the intelligence community. We have people at the highest levels of every agency in the United States are part of the militia patriot movement at this time. All right? I received information, and I got to tell you a great little sidebar, whatever, it just came to my mind. A little while back, it was about 1 year ago, we got to, I received a letter from an insider friend of mine with the Naval Intelligence. And I opened it up. And what it was that the Naval Intelligence had decided to investigate me and the Trockmans for sedition and violent acts and planning to overthrow the United States government. You know, give me a break. Anyhow, what had happened was that some jerk in Southern California going to one of our big meetings, similar to this one, and we had a list there, some of our miscellaneous paperwork, and we had a list of executive orders of the presidents of the United States that were ridiculous, that we were handing out to people. These were not our orders, these were the orders from the president. And we had 2 or 3 other things. We had a list of the people that are high-level people involved with the Center for Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission and those different organizations that want to put us down the toilet, okay? We had a list of that. It was a regular meeting, the same as it is here. And we had videotapes and audio tapes and paper handouts and things like that, all right? And so what happened was some jerk went to the meeting, like that he had gone into some secret thing, see? And he got some of the handouts and he was giving out to everybody. All right? And he slithered away with some of the crap that we shipped out all over the United States. That you can get out of the library if you want to. Anyhow, he slithered away and he went to the Naval Intelligence people in Southern California. And he said, "Psst, hey, I discovered a group of seditious people." All right? So he got with the Naval Intelligence people. The Naval Intelligence were stupider than this guy, apparently. First off, what they even did with this jerk, okay, and I don't even know who he was, you know, they assigned him a secret number, a stool pigeon number, all right? This guy's James Bond now, right? Okay. And the Naval Intelligence put together an internal memo, a secret memo, within their own little office contract there, to create a special operations group to investigate Bob Fletcher and the Trockmans for sedition, and to investigate us for this, investigate us for that, and to find out if we've ever committed criminal acts against the government before, as if we were doing something now, you know, speaking out. And so it was like a 3-page internal secret memo to create this thing. Well, I got it 2 days after they generated it, okay, from my guy inside. So when we got it, I went over it, I said, wow, geez, look at this. That was ridiculous. So what I did was I faxed it back to the Naval Intelligence community. All right. But the jerk that had generated this thing very secretly, and I sent it back to him with a note, and a little handwritten thing, and I said, if you want to find out about our background, contact our 3 friends in the FBI, and I gave them their names. Okay, close friends of a couple guys that are good guys in the FBI. And I said, they'll let you know about our background. Okay, and then I said, enclosed also as a reference, please read the Constitution of the United States. We'll help you out. And then I said, enclosed is a packet to join the militia or start one of your own. You know, and we sent him everything he needed to get started. Now, but if you can imagine this poor sucker, right? There's like 9 people in this super secret where they go through and they palm print to get into the building and all this crap, right? Can you imagine? Now, what do you think went on when the guy got this back? And what was neat, at the bottom of our fax papers for the last year, I came up with this thing maybe a year or so ago. In quotes, it just says, "We are everywhere." Okay? Right? And I circled it. And, but can you imagine this poor sucker, right? These guys, they all are a little nutty anyhow. They all think they're James Bond. You know, they get carried away. Oliver North was that way. He had a code name for himself, Blood and Guts, right? And Rob Owen, who was his courier, this little flunky jerk that ran around and did stuff for him, he called himself TC, and that was the courier. Okay. Anyhow, these guys are all a little goofy, but if you can imagine sitting there, this guy gets his package back from the militia of Montana with his secret internal memo to create a special